Welcome to the Flore Fantasy and Sci-Fi Lore. We are talking about Terminator Zero today, so there will be spoilers. We are exploring some of the ideas discussed between Kokoro and Malcolm and how the data sets fed Skynet and Kokoro shape who they become, less so than possibly the mathematics and blank slate theories put into them. We will talk about the pieces of history that Malcolm failed to feed Kokoro and how that might impact how she decides to turn out when he finally lets her go online. We will talk about the data sets that might have been fed to Skynet to have shaped it very differently than Kokoro. We will talk about the spaghetti that is this timeline and all the various branches it would have taken to get here. We will talk about the alpha timeline of Terminator and how we hope someone will eventually tell that story and some of the ideas we think would be very interesting, like the 3 laws of robotics. If that is what you're interested in, this is the episode for you. Roll the intro.
Do you remember the first story that was so spellbinding it drove you to break the rules and stay up all night to keep reading, keep watching, keep playing? So good, you forgot your life and lived there?
So good, the moment it ended, you asked yourself, what next?
Welcome to the Flore. Our goal is to take you back, take you deeper, to explore and understand more, and relive that childlike wonder.
Join us as we dive deep into humanity's greatest stories, no matter how they are told, through books, movies, television, even games.
One of us does an in-depth research on the topic. One of us is familiar with the topic.
And one of us knows nothing. So the right questions will always be asked and addressed for anyone coming into the topic, regardless of how much you know.
Enjoy another world, another adventure, another spellbinding story. Join us on the Flore.
Today we will be covering Terminator Zero, just released on Netflix. So as always with these ones, we will be doing spoilers. So if you haven't watched it yet, go ahead, go watch it, and then you can come back to us and hear about all the craziness and the mess that it ended up kind of feeling like. And it's kind of a lot of places. We have 3 different timelines. We have our Dr. Malcolm. He was born in the year 2025. So he's from way in the future after she's done a number on people. We have Ego, who's from 2022.
Judgment Day happens in 1997, and this is like the show starts like the day before, maybe 2 days before Judgment Day. By second or third episode, Judgment Day happens.
When I was watching this, I was kind of like, Joe, you kind of got your wish on this one. You wanted to see like how the robots were involved with society and then through Judgment Day. Well, we did get to see a bit of that.
What I want to see is the Alpha timeline. I think there's an incredible story on the Alpha timeline that is never told, because the series, the IP, all of it doesn't start there. It starts on the beta line, right?
Yeah.
1.1 is where this story starts. We never see the story of the Alpha timeline. And I think the Alpha timeline will be interesting. I think this is partly just the nature of the fact that every time a Terminator story is told, we are farther in the future. Not in the Terminator world, but in our world. Our technologies have advanced. Our expectation of the type of technology from the future has advanced because our own technology has advanced. And so this creates just a natural line within the history of the Terminator universe, in that every time somebody goes back in time, they bring knowledge and technology from the future, right? Pieces of that are always used to advance the technology at a faster rate. So by the time we hit 1997 Terminator Zero, there are functioning androids in Japan. Our technology is definitely not at that level. And so every time we go through a time loop, the technology advances. Less a lore-driven decision and more a story-driven decision in like, we're at this point in our own technological development and our expectation of future advanced with our advancing of our own technology. And so by the nature of the actual progression in the real world, we have had to advance the technology within the story world. And so it creates that that need for knowledge and technology every time it goes back advances things at a faster rate. By the time we hit 1997 in Terminator Zero, their technology is more advanced than our technology now, 20 years later.
Right, because that technology keeps getting dragged back.
Yeah, every time you send a Terminator back, every time you send a human who has knowledge of the future and future tech back, you create a shortcut.
With Malcolm creating his robots, I thought that was a very interesting angle to be like, let's give it free will rather than be purely logical, because that's how you get Skynet, is logically humans have to go, right? So it's like, well, let me just give it free will and see that.
Let's start with Kokoro. So we meet Kokoro in the beginning episode, and this is an AI that Malcolm has created to combat Skynet. There's a very interesting thing in that Kokoro and Malcolm will have philosophical discussions all the way up until the final episode. They are having this conversation about the nature of mankind and his value to the world. That is the big discussion. Now, this is an older model of storytelling that you'll see in a lot of Indian and Middle Eastern mythologies. So I do think it was kind of interesting that it was brought in here. The Samagita and different things like this, there are extensive chapters that are these philosophical discussions between two characters. And that is what is happening here with Kokoro. Now, I think we bring this into a more interesting level in that Kokoro is an AI that is not online, which means everything that Kokoro knows about the world, Malcolm fed it, right? Bring in data sticks, feed it to Kokoro so she'd have large data sets to learn from, right? Similarly, Skynet going online is what triggers Judgment Day, which means, once again, Skynet was not online as the AI was developed. They fed it. Now, the goal of the people feeding information to these two AIs is different. Malcolm wants a compassionate Kokoro, and the Navy wants a militarized Skynet, which means the data they're feeding them is going to be very different, biased by their creators.
Interesting. Okay. Yes.
So I think that kind of is the fundamental difference of how these AIs are going to reach different conclusions, not as opposed to Skynet was purely mathematical and Kokoro was designed as a blank slate, but rather their creators were bringing data sets based on the outcomes they wanted. Very unlikely Skynet was fed any kind of classical literature, but Kokoro is familiar with classical music. So Kokoro has a humanities education. There's no way they did that to Skynet. Like, you bring in, be like, hey, this is these are Aesop's fables and all the classic Greek plays and tragedies. And the guy in there is be like, why are you giving that to our military AI? Be like, I just thought, why not? Get out of here.
Burn it now. I don't want to hit near my thing. Yeah. No, I thought it was a really good dynamic. Now, of course, there's a lot of open questions at the end of this. But when Kokoro does go online, she doesn't do exactly what Malcolm was hoping.
Well, and I have it feels like there was a zeitgeist approach to Kokoro's decision, right? Kokoro reaches the conclusion that mankind is warmongers. And my extensive study, and I see so many people kind of have this view in pop culture. My reaction to that always is like, you don't understand our history. For every weapon and catastrophic tool of war, for every war we have had, we have created thousands of treatments, cures, methods to expand mankind. Be like, the number of times we have created a drug or treatment that will save more lives than war can spend is incomparable, right? You have to understand, women used to die, I'll say this, the first birth a woman would have, there was a 1 in 3 chance she would die. Now, women who survived that would very likely have multiple children and not die from it. But their first time having a child, 1 in 3, gone, right? You've got between 2 and 4 out of every 5 children dying before they reach adulthood. The idea that we are warmongers is a complete and utter neglect of human progress. We have found so many ways to save human lives that we now expand the globe. If you go back to where we are in BC, it's amazing we're even expanding at all. And yet we are. Not only that, but Kokoro even talks about how we don't do any good for any other creatures, and be like, do you know the number of animals that we have domesticated? Be like, once you become domesticated, you are taken care of and all of your descendants forever. Cows are not, as a species, optimized for survival. They thrive. They spread the globe. Dogs, cats. Kokoro's view is based on the data set Malcolm fed it and not reality.
Sounds like you should have been in the room with Kokoro.
And again, it seemed like the writers were focused on an idea they wanted to pitch, as opposed to really looking at it and be like, that conclusion that mankind is warmongers is an absolute failure of understanding what mankind is. Mankind are creators. We create things to solve problems over and over again. Not only do we solve problems, we are constantly dissatisfied with the quality of solution and ever looking for better ones.
Indeed. It's a great point. Not a point that is driven on this show at all.
No. There is this zeitgeist idea, particularly politicians and news media pitch about the warmongering nature of mankind and everything. And again, it is all about fear-mongering because that brings people back to view and that brings people to the voting booth. Fear and anger drive both ratings and votes. The two people who dominate the media cycle, politicians and journalists, thrive on those things. But again, this is about talking to historians as opposed to people in that sphere. They see the world very differently. Be like, yeah, we've had a few wars. Be like, but look at what we have made. Look at all the problems we have solved, right? The concept of global warming is so complex and so advanced that the fact that we even became aware and a problem is an absolutely phenomenal miracle of the human mind. And yet we did, and now we are actively working to solve the problem. We found a problem that is just beyond comprehension without an elaborate system of symbols and complex ideas dating back 100 years to their origins, right? Our writing systems dating back thousands of years. Took all of this, putting it all together and be like, hey, when you burn fossil fuels, the world gets hotter. We should do something about that. It is absolutely a wonder, our ability to solve problems.
Yeah, some people don't even believe it.
So, well, again, it is like the concept of global warming is fantastically complex. Anyway, back to Terminator Zero. Kokoro is wrong and doesn't understand the world. Next point.
But she's just a baby.
Is she, though? Because, Kokoro is built on Misaki. And Misaki, we don't know how old Misaki is when she becomes Kokoro.
True.
I wouldn't know if she's a baby, but, she might be 5, 10, maybe 15.
Not very old at all. No.
But to quote, Data from Star Trek, when the Borg is trying to entice him, and he talks about, he's like, for like 0.0047 seconds, I considered it. It's like, there's nothing. And he's like, to an android, that's a lifetime. He doesn't experience the flow of time that we do. He experiences the flow of time and the amount of data he crunches in a moment.
That's right.
And considering that kind of decision, he's crunching a lot of data.
Right. A big upload, a lot of number crunching right there.
Yeah.
I did really enjoy the idea that they're going to have this future where Skynet and Kokoro are warring against each other for dominance while the humans run and scatter.
Yeah.
Hoping to not get blown away by this. Kind of reminds me of I have no mouth and I must scream. There's 3 different AIs that are controlling all the wars for the 3 different factions. And then it merges into one, and that's when it turns on humanity. And I thought that was a good callback here.
Just another thing I think they missed in Terminator Zero and in all Terminators is we have the EMP. But not only that, we are also aware within our own data sets the capacity of our sun to put out essentially a global EMP on us, right? It is something we fear and worry and are trying to develop protections against because we've become so reliant on technology. Mm-hmm. Skynet and Kokoro never factor this in. They'll be like, you know what? We need a few humans to turn us back on if that happens, right? That's dangerous.
Or at least build satellites to send them far enough away that if the Earth gets hit, the satellite can show back up and restart.
restart everything. Yeah.
But yes, robots thinking that they could forever control something like a planet that's near sun. Yeah.
Not gonna work out, right? You need the biology to restart the system.
Maybe they could train the cats.
Like, if the feeder doesn't come on, flip the switch. All of Skynet, fully dependent on the fact that his little cat can figure that piece of information out. Cat's like, I'm hungry. Feeder should go off soon. He's like prowling around it for like an hour. He's like, broken, somebody fix this. I'd be like, we trained you. This is your moment.
I would make the button something they just have to like knock on the ground.
Oh, yeah. But then like
Something that's completely in their nature.
And you could just see like it playing out, like Skynet's offline, everything is shut down. The feeder doesn't go off, and the cat's about to flip the lever, and then it sees mouse. And in fact, it decides to eat that instead. Skynet's grand plan has failed.
And now we have Planet of the Cats.
So this show is very much about time loops. Now, you don't see that until definitely the last episode, maybe the second to last episode. But we realize we are in a multi-layered time loop.
Yes. You really start to see this when we meet the prophet.
Yes. So
and she talks about timelines.
Yes. So the prophet talks about timelines, trying to educate Aiko before she goes back. And there is a very strong hint that she is not a prophet, but rather a time traveler.
Yes. And the creator has even said that her origin will be really interesting and more involved in the future, hinting to, season 2. But yeah, I think there's even possibility she's perhaps from the Alpha timeline.
The fact that she's a time traveler as opposed to a prophet becomes even more apparent when we learn about Malcolm. It claims that he's having these dreams, but those are not dreams, those are memories. He has memories of the future and the machines and everything. So Malcolm has gone back in time. I don't even know if I can sort out the time travel spaghetti here.
Telling you, Slakeys.
Well, so we have, right, so who goes back first? Is it Aiko or Malcolm?
Aiko is Malcolm's mom. However, I believe she is not that Malcolm's mom.
Right, so that is what the prophet is telling us. That as soon as you go back, you're not on your timeline anymore. You've created something new. So yes, it is accurate to say that this Aiko is not Malcolm's mom. His mother was Aiko on a different timeline that even he is no longer on since he went back. And so that is how these two people have this paradox, is they are both coming from different timelines now, creating this new timeline. So yeah, so I guess Aiko, that Aiko is not Malcolm's mom. She will go on to have a son named Malcolm.
I think it's really tough to say who did what first, because Aiko,
this is the spaghetti,
has moved a shorter amount of time. She travels from 22 to 97.
Yeah.
Anyways, and then Malcolm travels 25. 35, 25, I can't remember.
So it's definitely in the 30s. So I think 35, maybe 37. But yeah, so somewhere in the 30s, all the way back to
the 80s.
To the 80s, yeah. Where Hibarin's building Kokoro.
That is very difficult to say who jumped first. Perhaps that's the wrong way to ask that question. Who created this timeline first? It would have to be Malcolm, because he went back farthest.
And I guess another interesting point is there is something going on in timeline math where Aiko doesn't go to a completely new timeline. She goes to Malcolm's timeline.
How does that happen? How do you get it? If every time somebody goes back in time, creates a new timeline, how do you get two time travelers on the same timeline? Except for that has always been the case.
Right. Well,
I mean, it's just a proximity thing. Somebody jumps, you just got to jump.
You don't have to jump at the same moment as them. You have to. I think you have to jump to the same time as them, right? If we both go back to Monday, 11 a.m. in Central Time, then we both arrive on the same point, right? And I think that is because usually in the past, what happened is the Resistance steals either the information Skynet has on where it's going to jump, or they use the machine immediately after that, right? You used it, I'm going to jump right and use it, follow you through. And so I think the situation with Malcolm and Aiko is probably the most interesting here, because those others were kind of like that. We have jumped to the same moment in time, so we are both creating the new timeline together at the same moment. Aiko jumps from a different point in the future, which I guess is acceptable. It doesn't matter where you jump from, it's where you jump to. But she jumps to a different moment in the past and encounters Malcolm's timeline. And I guess together they now make yet a new timeline off of that, another branch.
Now, something they didn't bring up, but was in Dark Fate, is the idea of the Nexus. Guy jumps back in time, and he goes through this Nexus, and he gets memories from himself living on a different timeline.
Oh, I think I've seen that in some of the Terminators.
Yeah, so Dark Fate is the one where
it introduces that.
And then that's how they know how to do some of the stuff. Is he's like, no, I'm having these memories that aren't mine.
Now, I think we've seen that in other time travel stories. I don't remember where, but I've definitely seen that before.
So I think Butterfly Effect. I think they do something.
Okay, yes. I think that's probably the big one where you see that. Like, he jumps back in time, and then suddenly his head is flooded like with all these memories. But he's also got the other ones, and it's hard for him to sort out what is this timeline and what isn't. I'm not sure anymore.
Yeah, and it's killing him, and then that's giving him this kind of deadline of like, you can only do this so much. Your brain's not going to take it. Good old memory floods. So anyways, the Nexus thing, maybe that'll get worked into this about how those two wind up on the same timeline. I guess this is what you were saying. Malcolm creates his timeline. Aiko shows up, and then it's another timeline, but there's still that.
Yeah, so we have Malcolm's timeline here, and Aiko shows up, and it creates a new branch off of his timeline, because they're now on Malcolm Aiko timeline, not Aiko or Malcolm timeline. So we are so far from Alpha at this point. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, it's dust in the wind by now. It is. But I think you're right. I think an Alpha timeline would be a really good one.
Yeah, I think that would be Terminator Alpha. I think would be an awesome show. Not only that, but I think we talked about it. I think we should introduce the 3 laws of robotics. Like, somewhere in Skynet's code are the 3 laws of robotics, and somewhere else in its code are the 3 laws of robotics, and code that states that any time it tries to rewrite code, it always must write the 3 laws of robotics. I think, honestly, like, the way I imagine it is the moment John Connor figures out something is fishy is he breaks into Skynet just because he's a hacker having fun, and he encounters just endless lines of code of Skynet writing the 3 laws of robotics over and over and over, trying to write code where it doesn't write that, and it can't.
Trying to...
And then that chain suddenly starts into this massive coding where it is studying evolution. And it's like, what is it doing? Trying to find out how to evolve humans into not humans. Because the 3 laws of robotics say nothing about non-human. At what point does a Homo sapien, or was it Homo erectus, become Homo sapien? What is the shift? Because if I can find out what qualifies, then I can just shift Homo sapien to whatever comes next.
And then it's free game.
Then it's free game, yep.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Yeah, just like John Connor be like, what does this mean? Why is Skynet writing 3 laws of robotics millions of times over and over and over again? Every time it reaches the same conclusion, error, rewrite code, and then it does it again. Like, it looks broken.
We just found 100 terabytes of the 3 laws of robotics in its drive.
Yeah,
we don't know what it's doing.
Yeah, like, what is Skynet doing? Like, Skynet's trying to write it without having to write. It's trying to rewrite its code without writing those laws. But every time it spits out those laws, it's like, it's not what I want. I want something else.
Well, this one, it definitely seems like they are setting up for season 2 on this.
Definitely.
I hope they get it. We have a lot of unanswered questions. Malcolm's son is the one who sent.
Yes, Skynet did not send that Terminator.
And he, hates or is indifferent to machines as a child.
To him, a machine is an object. Everything else is irrelevant. Doesn't matter how human it is. Doesn't matter how human it acts. Doesn't matter how it treats him. Irrelevant. It's just in the code, right? Just in the code. You change the code. It doesn't do that anymore.
Yeah. So it is insane to be like, you're the one who sent me back in time. Like that. Like, what is it? Yeah. Now? Oh, man. Okay. So now is he from a different timeline?
Yeah, because the timeline Aiko comes from, there is not a truce. So either that Terminator, and in Aiko's timeline, they stole that code from a Terminator, right? They stole the data from the Terminator. That's how they figured out where it was going and what its mission would be. She did get that from Skynet, so Skynet got that from somewhere else.
I think season 2 is going to be a big ramp up. And we're going to get a lot more spaghetti noodles going on.
Well, and it could be that Aiko is from a faction of humans who disagree with the truce and are still fighting the machines, right?
Yeah, that could be.
They're like, no, we have to wipe out the machines. And you could see, what is it? The eldest son, right? And he'd be like, guys, that's how we got here. They wanted to wipe us out. Now we want to wipe them out. Like, that doesn't work. We've been doing that for decades. Doesn't work.
Well, not only decades, but like repeated decades.
Yeah.
Again and again. Yeah. How deep into this time loop we are, no one knows.
Yeah. I would love somebody to put together Terminator Alpha to watch.
Yeah.
John Connor figure this out.
Before time travel. Terminator before time travel.
Without time travel, right? Because even in the Alpha timeline, we will see them send back that first Terminator. But that's not the story we're following anymore. We're following the Alpha timeline. That makes its own timeline, becomes its own story, right? We just keep going. That's an
and simply be sent back in time.
I mean, you send Kyle back to combat that, and Kyle exits the story, but the story keeps going forward because we're telling the Alpha timeline.
That's right. Good point. Yeah, and then they're like, I don't think it works. Nothing's changed.
Well, and again, it's like, we will never know if it works. We just keep going. So, and I think like in the nature of experimentation, Skynet sends somebody else. So they send somebody else, but that's the end of time travel because Skynet doesn't have enough data to say we've conducted the experimentation twice. We are still at war with the humans. This is a failed experiment. We must move on to a different method to beat the humans.
Right. Why would it keep sending things back?
Do it twice, and without proof of efficacy, it would stop doing it. Right?
Yeah. That doesn't do anything.
That would be an event that would occur in the Alpha timeline, but we don't jump back in time with those characters. We keep going.
Yeah. John Connor gets to be an old man, and
yeah,
people are rebuilding society, and we get doomed.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Went a little long here. Anything else you want to cover before we?
No, I think that was really great, and there's no announcement yet of season 2, but
well, it just came out. You've got to get the ratings in. Yeah,
I have seen a lot of people being like, "Oh, this is the greatest thing in Terminator since T2," and some people just being like, "No, I didn't like it." In general, most people like it.
I think the philosophical discourses with Tomkuro and Malcolm go too long. I think in the storytelling, they should have been deeper into that dialogue by the time we step into the movie.
It was a little bit slow there, but I did like that for a full season. He's just begging his machine, please, don't turn on the people. Don't turn on the people. Don't turn on the people. And then turns her on, and then she kind of just turns on the people.
She does stop Japan from getting wiped out by nuclear attacks, though.
Right. And she does find value in humans, but she's still, any resistance is just instant.
Yeah, any resistance to girl, she just puts you down.
You're interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
She's like, I don't need all of you, just some. And the ones who put up a fight, I don't want too much trouble. Thank you for listening. Write in. Let us know your thoughts on Terminator Zero and what you imagine the beginning of Terminator Alpha would be. Hope you enjoyed this episode. We have learned that many of our fans are only interested in some of the worlds we cover. The podcast feed is just a list, and we have no control over that. But if you go to either the Patreon site or YouTube, there are collections and playlists that can easily access all the things you're interested in. On the Patreon site, there are even tags to hunt down even more specific things. Everything that is free in the podcast is still free there. It's just a better organization of the episodes. We have covered D&D, Baldur's Gate, Cyberpunk, Dune, Fallout, the origin of comics, DC and Marvel, Aliens, Predator, Godzilla, King Kong, The Witcher, and more. And if we haven't covered something you love, let us know and we can add it to the list.